Today, we're excited to announce our latest product, Rapid API Testing. Rapid API tests with sophisticated reporting and analytics, including detailed webhook for integration across your CI/CD pipeline. Now that we've top right corner, we have a video that shows you how to add listed here on the left-hand side. Select the desired endpoint, click Send in the top corner, and we get our response here. This looks good, so I'll go ahead and pass if the request returned to status. We have some in all three locations. You can see I have switched over to the Analytics tab. I also let a few hours pass, so the test has run quite a few times now to give us a bit more data to look at. We can also see the results for each test on the results page. You can filter by a few different categories in the top left. You'll notice the analytics and results we
are right here, and you can see this is the one that we've set the content type, but we also have these ones automatically set as well. Now there are other response headers that we can set manually, and we might see some of them later on, but for now this is enough. So
we're excited to announce our latest product, Rapid API Testing. Rapid API Testing is a functional API testing solution for creating
Hello, and welcome to this course for developing Node.js applications with MongoDB. My name is Matt, and I'll be one of your instructors. This course will focus on...
In this lesson, we are going to discuss the MongoDB URI to tell the driver the host name and port where MongoDB is similar to an URL, which you are probably very familiar by browsing the internet. URIs are used to define the connections between applications and MongoDB instances. Applications can use URI strings to tell the driver the host name and port where MongoDB is running, the username and password used to log in, and any other connection options. Basically, everything about a connection to MongoDB can be defined in the URI string used to start the connection to the database. This is the standard URI string. In order to use this URI string, we have to be explicit about the host names of each of the servers in our cluster. And if the host name of one of the servers changes, we have to update the URI string to account for it. In many courses, we will be using a new kind of URI string, what we called an SRV string. The SRV string begins at this point with this prefix that tells MongoDB it's the address of the SRV record. We'll talk about that in a minute. The next portion is composed of authentication credentials. We separate the username and password with a colon, and then follow the password with an @ sign. After the @ sign, we specify the host, which is the host name of the SRV record for the MongoDB cluster that we want to connect to. Note that this host name does not actually point to a database server. It only hosts the SRV records. The hostname is the address of the file called SRV record or service record. This service record will define its own DNS with a list of host names that we want to resolve to. So even though we are connecting to a cluster of servers, we don't need to know where each server in the cluster is because the SRV record keeps track of it for us. This is especially useful when the servers in our cluster change or rotate out, because the SRV record will be updated to reflect this, and we don't need to change anything in our client side. This part of the connection string is the authentication database. This is the database in our cluster that contains the credentials of this user. Essentially, what we are saying is, I want to connect as this user, and the credentials to authenticate this user are stored in this database. Here's an example of a URI string with the SRV format. We've been specified our username and password at this point. Then we're going to have a hostname of the SRV record. Then the database that we want to authenticate against. If we wanted to specify any other option for the connection, we make this with this string, which specify them at the end after the question mark. This option will retry by default if a connection error arises, so we set it to retry writes equals true. To recap, in this lesson we covered the structure of the URI string, and we briefly discussed the reason to use SRV record. The URI string is required to connect to
Hello, and welcome to Chapter 1 of the course. We've already covered all of the bookkeeping information for the course and explored the application structure, so now it's time to dive in. In this chapter,
Hello. In this lesson, we're going to review the architecture and configure the pieces necessary to help the site grow as a modern application project. At the top level of the mflix.js handout, you'll find a README file, which can help you set up all the necessary components and dependencies that you need for mflix to function. It has a routing layer, which allows... In this course, we'll be using Node Package Manager, or NPM, to run and test the application, as well as install any of the necessary dependencies. if I run npm install here, it'll find all the dependencies in the package.json file and install the correct versions of those packages. Framework and then, to verify your directory, you'll find an API directory, which has the routing files, the DAO directory, which is really where the work is going to be done in this course.
Hello everyone, my name is Dave. Welcome to your next tutorial on APIs and microservices. And we're building a very robust microservice with Laravel Lumen. This is what you use to run your Lumen app. So I'll copy it. I'll go to my called this, and we don't.
Богатыми рождаются, остальные живут от зарплаты до зарплаты? Вовсе нет. Обязательно досмотрите этот ролик до конца.
Remember that you too can add headers too. Then we have cookies and the stuff that we're taking care of. Alright, and what we got was, so we have the API view 1, post view 1, you click send, and check the web.php, which is the in our postman. So click on send. We are for post 1. So back to our
What if I want to send back some HTML instead of just
send a request to this API, to this step.
Кто такой Иса, сын Марьям? Что он сделал и зачем?
В этом уроке давайте разберем с вами все, что касается создания запроса и что с этим связано. Мы с вами создадим запрос. Создать запрос можно несколькими способами. Самый простой — это через, соответственно, вкладочку. Есть вариант воспользоваться большой кнопкой плюс и создать, соответственно, запрос. И также можно, например, создать коллекцию и уже внутри этой коллекции создать какой-то запрос, который будет относиться именно формат ответ в виде в JSON формате. Здесь есть некий аргумент, довольно большое количество. Кстати, мы их откроем. Откуда они взялись? Кстати, на данный момент пост запроса есть перемена. Данными здесь вписывается код, здесь вписываются переменные. Вы посмотрели первую половину?
One, two, breathe. 3, 4, and...
Let's say we have identified a book that we want to order. So what would be the next step? Again, we have to jump back to documentation and to understand how to submit an order. You can now see that the endpoint that we need to use is orders, but this time also the HTTP request method, we're no longer getting data. With post, we are sending data. So we need to create a post request with Postman. All right, so let's get started with writing API tests. So APIs, the response body will be written in JSON. This is just a very simple way to send data from the API to Postman or to any, let's say, programming language and to transform it and use it there. Essentially, the data that is coming back
Hello guys, welcome to Testing Academy. My name is Pramod and welcome to the series of API testing using Postman. And in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to do a CRUD in Postman. Basically, CRUD means create CRUD11, or yeah, let's name it as CRUD demo 1. Okay, the first thing first, let me do this like this, and this is the CRUD demo 1, right? Let me star it, and so that it's will come to upwards or as a first result environment URL, right? And I am going to this the value, total exact value of it, right? And we can also click using this I button, and that URL value is this. Notice the slash also. So right now we are not using slash, okay? But what should we ideally do is that we need to change it so that slash is not present, because it sometimes create a confusion. So I don't.
Ага, вы как раз вовремя. Добро пожаловать.
And age, right? If I send this, I will get an error that since the name is unique, here the name is a unique, so we need to send some random. Every time we need to send a random name, or you can say a new employee, right? So what I have done is that I have created a pre-script. It's a very small pre-script that I'm going to copy from this. Just go to pre-script, and what we are going to do is that we are using a dynamic variable. I have explained this concept of dynamic variable in previous videos. What we can do is that what it will do is that it will replace with some certain random integer from 0 to 1000 and promode. So promode 050, 0, promode 396, so any number will come. And what we are doing is that we are setting this value in an environment.
Yo gang, and welcome to your 6.5 REST API tutorial, and in this video I'm going to introduce you to Postman, which is some nifty software to help us test our API routes. API, okay? So then how the hell do we test out these different routes here, these different handlers? Make sure they're all working correctly, because we don't have a front end to this application making requests, and we certainly don't have a third-party app or a mobile app or something like that making requests to these different handlers right here. So what are we going to do? Well, yeah, we could test out this GET request handler by typing in the endpoint into a browser, because remember, a browser uses GET requests by default. So we're going to get this response in a browser. However, these ones here, the post, put and delete, we're going to have a much harder time with, because we can't do that via a browser. Okay, we have to do that via code, typically from another application or a front end. So the situation is this: we have our API on the left over here. We have Express app running in Node.js with our different route handlers set up, listening, waiting for requests to them. We also have MongoDB running in the background, but we've not really touched this yet, so don't worry about it for now. So the idea is one of these things over here on the right are going to be making requests to this API, right? Either a front end, a mobile app, or another website. So another website, for example, could make a GET request to this endpoint. And this API, this app, is going to look at it and say, okay, I've set up a handler for this GET request, and I'm going to run this code and handle it. Or this could be a put request or a post request or something like that, okay? So this is going to handle whichever request comes along. However, since we don't have any of these things on the right at the minute, we need to kind of simulate these requests to make sure they're behaving as we would expect. Enter onto the scene Postman, which you can get at getpostman.com, which is some simulate left here. Get, post, put, and delete are what we're going to be looking at. Then right here, we can put in our endpoint, our URL. We can also add parameters, query parameters that is, with a key and value pair. And remember, query parameters are those things at the end of an endpoint or URL where it has a question mark, then a variable name such as name equals the value of that. So for example, question mark, name equals Yoshi. All right, so they're query parameters. We can add those onto, which we'll take a look at later on. And we can also add in custom headers and body. Not for a GET request, but if we go to post, we can add the body right here so we can send data to the API as well. So we're definitely going to be taking a look at that later. For now, I just want to make simple requests to each of our 4 handlers. So one GET, one post, one update, and one delete, right? I say update, I mean put, this one right here. So let's take a look at our different handlers. So remember, we're going to /ninjas, but with /API in front of it, and this is a GET request. And for this one, it's the same, /ninjas. And in each example, we're just getting a simple object back with a property of type inside, which is telling us the type of request we have made. So get. First of all, we're going to localhost. And remember, this is at port 4000 that we're listening for, /API, /ninjas. So we're making a GET request to this endpoint, and we should get that object back. So let's press send, and sure enough, we get that object back. At getpostman.com. So let's send on to the request object. Right there, so we can access it. So say for example this is some unique ID of a ninja, then it's going to pop it onto this request object. We can add, if I don't add this on, if I take that off and still try to make a delete request to this
Отбасымыздың әр мүшесі Foodmaster живой йогуртын салқын жерде сақтау керектігін біледі. Өйткені оның құрамында
Alright then gang, so now we've figured out how to use templates and middleware, I want to go one step further and introduce a database to the mix as well so we can store data in that. And now it's completely free to begin with and you can sign up for a free account right here by clicking on this button and just signing up. I already have an account, so I'm going to just log in right here with my Google account. And then when you sign up, you should see this page. Now, it might look a little bit different when you view this, depending on when you're watching the video. They do change their design a little bit, but the functionality... Let's click on collections to do that. And then we want to add our own data. We need to remember documents for... So this is our collection right here. There's no documents in it at the minute. What I'm going to do now is create a user so that we can use that user for database access from our code over here. So let's go to database access and create a new database user. I'm going to call this NetNinja and the password is going to be test1234. Please create something that's more unique than that and more secure. We need to give read and write access to any database and I'm going to add user right here. So I'm going to use that user later on, the username and the password I created from our code so that we can connect to the database. That way, not anyone can just connect to the database, only a valid user that we declare right here. So some kind of admin user. All right, so now we need to go back to clusters and we need to figure out a way to connect to this database. So I'm going to connect right here and then we want to connect from our application like so, and this connection string we're going to need later on. So I'm going to copy this right here and I'm going to go back over to our app file and I'm going to create for now just a new variable, so const, and I'll call this dbURI and set it equal to this string like so. So we're going to use that shortly to connect to our database. And in fact, I'm going to grab that and I'm going to paste it actually below where we declare our app, and I'm going to also do a little comment that says connect to MongoDB. So this is the connection string that we're going to use later on to connect to our database. And we're going to replace this right here with our username, which is NetNinja, which we just created, right? And this is test1234. That was our password. So then now we need to actually connect to the database. And we could connect using the plain MongoDB API and package, and we could use the regular MongoDB API to make queries to the database too, but that can sometimes be a bit clunky and verbose. So instead, we'll be using something called Mongoose to connect and interact with the database, which I think makes it a bit easier and it's nicer to work with. So let's take a quick look at what Mongoose actually is.
One, two, breathe. 3, 4, and
Okay then my friends, so Mongoose is an ODM library, and that is an object document mapping library, and that basically means that it wraps the standard MongoDB API and it provides us with a much easier way to connect to and communicate with the database. Now it does this by allowing us to create simple data models which have database query methods to create, get, delete and update database documents. Now under the hood, Mongoose does all the heavy lifting for us. It queries the correct database collection for us based on the name of the model we use, and then it performs the action required and returns us a response. Now you don't have to use Mongoose, you can just use the standalone MongoDB library if you prefer, but sometimes it can feel a bit more clunky and verbose. So we're going to use Mongoose, and let me break down exactly how we're going to be using it in our project. So the way we generally work with MongoDB and Mongoose is to create schemas and models. Now this is quite similar to how we typically work with any kind of data resource. We'd make a model to represent that data resource. We'll then have both static and instance methods which we can use to save, update, delete or read data from the blocks collection. So that's kind of the theory behind it. Don't worry so much if it's called connect like so. Now this expects as an argument a connection string like this. Now before we pass it in, I do want to make a quick change to this. At the minute it's